Hola chicos, these are your notes on syntax and forming questions. So fill in your notes as we continue through these slides. Syntax is the order of words, so write that into your notes. It's the order of words in a sentence. So in English we already know how to order our words. Now we're going to talk about the order that we're going to put words in English. We're going to start with declarative syntax, and that's a kind of sentence that just gives information. That syntax is subject followed by a verb, then what we call a remainder. The remainder is going to be all the extra information. Here's an example. We have ustedes trabajan los sábados. Ustedes is our subject, trabajan is the verb, and the rest of the information on Saturdays is our remainder. So the remainder could be all that extra information that we can get from a sentence. In this case, when you all work on Saturdays. Maybe it's who you work with, con tus amigos, with your friends, or where you work, in Dylan's, at Dylan's. So that extra information goes on the end. This is exactly what we can do in English. Y'all work on Saturdays. Nice and easy order of words. We call that declarative syntax. Next, we're going to look at negative syntax. So write that down. Negative syntax is different in Spanish. In Spanish, the word no can mean both no and not. So that means that when in Spanish you're answering a yes or no question in the negative, you're going to use the word no twice. This is what I mean. Caminan a la escuela? Do you walk to school? Well, no, we don't walk to school, right? So you would answer first, no. Then you need the do not walk. That's the second no. No, no caminamos a la escuela. So notice where that no went. That not goes right in front of our verb. So now our negative syntax is going to be subject. I put it in parentheses because here they skipped it. See how there's no subject out here? No in front of your verb, then your remainder. Notice that there is no word for do here. We are basically saying we not walk to school. You don't need the word do or does in Spanish to make something negative. It's easier. You just put not in front of your verb. So here's a sentence to compare to. In the last slide, we said y'all work on Saturdays. Now we want to say y'all don't work. Remember, we don't need the do. So all we do is put the no in front of our verb. Subject, no in front of your verb, on Saturdays. Now sometimes our verb is going to be a double verb. That means there could be two here. Together they are considered one big verb. For instance, ustedes no necesitan trabajar. Y'all don't need to work. Even though we have two verbs, necesitan and trabajar, they together are considered the verb, and the no will go right in front of them. Next, we're going to talk about how we form questions. There are three basic ways to form questions in Spanish. Can you guess what they are by looking at the photos and the photo captions? Here's the first way. ¿Te gusta mucho la tarea? No. So this is asking, you like homework a lot. Isn't that so? ¿Hablas con tu mamá? You speak with your mother. And ¿estudia Maru? Three different ways to form a question. Take a look at this first one. ¿Te gusta mucho la tarea? That could be a declarative sentence. You like homework a lot. So what made this into a question? Right, this no question at the end. That clarifier. Isn't that so? Isn't that right? By adding that to the end of a regular sentence, we have just made a question. Now look at this one. ¿Hablas con tu mamá? You speak with your mother. The understood tú is missing here, but this could be a declarative sentence. ¿Hablas con tu mamá? So we're going to talk about what makes that into a question. And then finally, ¿estudia Maru? Studies Maru? Man, that one looks really strange. We don't really understand that at all in English. So we'll take a look at the third way to form questions. Our first way is intonation. Intonation means to raise the pitch of your voice at the end of a sentence. So we may have a regular declarative sentence, and we can change it into a question by raising the end of our our sentence in the pitch of our voice. For instance, I could say something like, I am the teacher. That's a declarative sentence. I can change it into a question by intonation. I am the teacher. By raising the pitch of my voice at the end, I have made it into a question. So that's one way. But making it into a question, you still have to add the upside down question mark and a regular question mark to it. Okay? So this is still going to be our regular syntax, subject, verb, remainder, only we're going to add the question marks, and we're going to remember that when we read this, we're going to raise the pitch of our voice at the end. Here's an example. Ustedes trabajan los sábados. You work on Saturdays. This is declarative syntax. We can make it into a question by saying, Ustedes trabajan los sábados, raising the pitch of our voice. Okay, still subject, verb, remainder. We add our question marks. When we're reading it, we raise the pitch of our voice. Carlota busca un mapa. Carlota is looking for a map. Carlota busca un mapa. Raise the pitch of your voice. And now you've made it into, is Carlota looking for a map? Notice, we don't have the word do in the question. We don't have the word is in the question. We do not need those helping verbs in Spanish. The second way to form a question is by using interrogative syntax or inverting the subject and the verb. We call this also inversion. So the subject can change locations. So instead of having subject, verb, remainder with a raising of the pitch, we flip it. We make sure that our verb is in front of the subject. Or you can put it at the end. Our verb then is followed by the remainder and then our subject. But notice, in both of these, whether you put the subject in the middle or the subject at the end, the verb is coming first. That's called inversion. Inverting your sentence and making the subject go first. Ustedes trabajan los sábados. You all work on Saturdays. We're going to make it into a question by flipping our subject and our verb and getting our verb, then our subject. ¿Trabajan ustedes los sábados? Do you work on Saturdays? Notice, there's no do. Okay? That do is not needed in Spanish. All we need to do is flip these two. Y'all work on Saturdays? No do needed. Carlota regresa a las 6. Carlota returns at 6. So we're going to change it by saying regresa a las 6 Carlota. This time we put our verb first and we moved our subject, Carlota, all the way to the end. And we separated them by the remainder, the extra information. And once again, by putting the verb in front of your subject, you do not need does. No do, no does. Tú hablas español. You speak Spanish becomes hablas tú español, verb in front of your subject, then your remainder. So you speak Spanish becomes do you speak Spanish? Hablas tú español. Notice no do. Hablas español tú could also work. You could separate the you and the verb with the remainder in the middle. So remember, do and does are not needed in inversion when we have interrogative syntax. The third way is adding a tag. And a tag in Spanish is like the word no or verdad. So no is a clarifier like, isn't that so? Don't you? Doesn't he? Ustedes trabajan los sábados. You work on Saturdays. We're going to change this into a question by reading our same sentence. Ustedes trabajan los sábados. You work on Saturdays. Now we make it into a question. No, comma, and then the no. You work on Saturdays, don't you? Carlota regresa a las 6. Carlota returns at 6. Get the same thing again. Carlota returns at 6. ¿Verdad? Right? Or isn't that so? By adding a tag at the end, you can get inversion. So here are our 3 different ways. Same slide as earlier. ¿Te gusta mucho la tarea? No. We made it into a question by adding a tag word. Here, hablas con tu mamá. This is intonation because this is still our verb, understood subject, verb with your mother. So we have subject, verb, remainder, only we raise the pitch of our voice. Over here, estudia Maru. We have flipped. We have our subject after our verb. By putting our verb first, we have made this into a question. Does Maru study? But remember, we don't need the word does. Now, those are the three ways to make a regular sentence into a question. But of course, we also need to ask questions using interrogative words. So when you're going to ask a question that requires more than a yes or no answer, you need an interrogative word. In other words, you don't need to know whether something happens or not. You want to know where it happens or how it happens or why or who does it. So these are our interrogative words. New ones are a dónde, where to. See that to? It's stuck on the front. Before we had de dónde, from where, and just plain old dónde, where. Como we had before for how. Cuál and cuáles are new. Which and which ones. Cuándo is new. That's when. Cuánto and cuántas are very similar. Remember these? How much and how many. Que was what or which. Quién is who and quiénes was who, plural. When we go to write a question that requires more than that yes or no answer, we're going to use that interrogative word, right? Notice this one. Which of them studies in the library? ¿Cuál de ellos estudia en la biblioteca? Whoops, sorry about that. ¿A dónde caminamos? Where are we walking to? ¿Cuántos estudiantes hablan español? How many students? ¿Dónde trabaja? Where does Ricardo work? ¿Qué clases tomas? What classes are you taking? Notice that all of these, when you have a question word, begin with the question word. So, question word syntax is when the question word goes first, because you're asking for more than just a yes or no answer. The pitch of your voice is going to fall at the end of the sentence. Notice how I read this. ¿Cómo llegas a la clase? ¿Por qué necesitas estudiar? There's a higher pitch in your question word. So let's go back and listen to some of these again. ¿Quién enseña la clase de arte? ¿Cuánta tarea hay? The pitch of your voice is higher at the beginning. This syntax will be question word first, then your verb, followed by your subject or your remainder. Notice how we did this. Question word, ¿cómo? We skipped our subject, right? Llegas a la clase. ¿Por qué? Question word. Necesitas estudiar. Once again, we skipped our subject. We didn't have ¿por qué necesitas tú estudiar? Notice the difference between the word ¿por qué, which is written as two words and has an accent. Remember, ¿por qué means what? Sorry, it means why. ¿Por qué is written as one word and it doesn't have an accent. ¿Por qué estudias español? Why do you study Spanish? Porque es divertido. Because it's fun. Porque squished together, no accent is because. Porque separated with an accent is why. They like to go together. We like to answer why questions with because. So when you see a why question, try to use because in your answer. And that's all for these notes. Gracias.